Good afternoon, everyone. I am Elaine Hall-Corbin, your host, and welcome to Artists of Color. Today is an exciting day. I have to say it's a very, very exciting day. I have an amazing man with me who is bringing an amazing show to Roxbury next month. If you haven't heard about it, it's called We Move in Color. And my guest today is artist, director, writer, performer, Wyatt Jackson.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Wyatt, and I'm so glad you're here.
I am too.
I am really...
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
It's been a long time.
A very long time. You know what? The funny part, as I was thinking about you last night, and I was saying, the very first time I ever saw Wyatt was, guess when?
When? I cannot guess.
Black Nativity.
Wow.
So you know how long ago that was.
Boy, yeah, you're going
way back. Yes, and I said, And the reason that I thought about it is I was reading your bio, and I'm saying, how come that's not in there?
Oh, well, it can be.
Well, we must add that.
Okay, we'll do.
Because know the great Elma, not with us anymore, but
yep.
This year she would have been 102 years old.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's
amazing.
Isn't it?
It's
and
amazing.
She's brought so many of her artists, so many of her students have come after her.
Yes.
You being one of those.
Yes.
And when I was reading your bio and the things that you've done and where you've been, I said, Wyatt's done all of this. It was funny because I was sitting 3 rows in front of you at the show when I first saw it last year. Oh. And if it wasn't for Paul, I wouldn't have known about it.
Okay, well.
Yeah. And then he was on my show.
Yes.
And
I saw
we
that.
talked about it. And he told me, he says, I want you to come and see the show. And I came, and Monica Landrum, she and I came together.
Wow.
But it was an amazing show. I was so excited.
Thank you.
The history, the narrative.
Thank you.
And I want to talk about that.
Sure.
I want to know what made you want to do such a production like that?
So a series of conversations with the executive producer, but also a dear friend. He's also one of the writers of the show, Robbie Thomas, and I had these conversations about our history and about how we're elegant and how we're powerful and we have all these gifts and talents in the midst of coming through a country all these years that tried to oppress and keep us in a certain space. And we would have these conversations and it would get into, we would dream of doing something like this. And we would talk about if we could do this and that. And he would say, well, Wyatt, you have an Emmy Award and you have this and you've been on Broadway, you've done all these things. Why don't we design something? I'm like, it's so big, we have to figure out how to fit it into a theater.
Yes.
So a series of conversations around what did we want to say? And he moved to Las Vegas, got married, moved to Las Vegas, and we went out there and my wife and I, Marcia, we went out there and we sat with him and his wife Anita, who's in the show, and we talked further about what do we want to say. And it wasn't until I got back from that trip, when we were on the phone, we started talking specifically about all of the colors that we find in visual art, but then how all the colors that we find in our music, the nuances, and then all the colors that we find in our dance. And then just like air, I said, we move in color. That's
that was going to be my first question. Why did you pick that name? And now I know.
Yes, because we were thinking about visual artists. My cousin of mine, my father's cousin, Benny Andrews, was a famous artist from New York. He moved from Georgia to Chicago, then he moved to New York, and he was one of the first African Americans to have his work in the Museum of Modern Art. Then he started protesting museums in New York to say, how come you don't have more people of color? And then turns out that he mentored Paul Goodnight.
Oh, really?
So when I told Paul Goodnight that I wanted to do a show called We Move in Color, and that I was going to use some of Benny Andrews, some of his work, Paul said, count me in, because he was my mentor.
See?
And then when I talked to Lou Jones, the famous
Yes.
photographer, about his work being in the show immersively, he said, well, I took pictures of Paul when he first started doing his work.
And that's
That was the connection
the
there.
connection.
So it started to look like, wait a minute, this is organically coming together. There's something happening. Robbie Thomas is a poet. He's had 3 books published. So I used his poetry, which is all about being a man of color in this country.
Yes. I have one of his books.
Yeah. Yes, he told me. And before I knew it, we had a narrative that we could turn into a musical review.
Production. Why not? Why not?
So then the city of Boston gave us a grant to figure things out and do the show at the Strand. We had auditions in New York.
Oh.
So I figured, let's get the dancers from New York. Now there's wonderful dancers in Boston. And actually for this production this year, we have Stages Dance Company.
I saw.
Yeah, a couple of them are going to be in the show. Aiden Williams and Liberty Hull. I've seen them grow up.
I've seen her, yes.
Yes.
I've seen her
So,
perform too.
make a long story short, we got the folks together in New York. Maxine Lyle, the choreographer of Step Dance, I got her to come on board as the choreographer of Step. Then I got Cheryl Pollard Thomas, New York Times critically acclaimed dancer, got her to do the modern and African dance. Then I went over to Maurice Chestnut, who was in the production of Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, the tour of that, and got him to do the tap dance. So the dancers who were selected to be in the show, they all have to do all these disciplines. So We Move in Color is what it's really called. And the immersive art of Paul Goodnight, we have his art on 40 by 30
Yes, you do.
screens digitally.
Yes.
And Lou Jones, his work. So I'm going on and on about the specifics, but aesthetically, it is like Paul Goodnight said when he finally saw it. He said, this is a hurricane of emotions.
And it is. I laughed at times. I cried at times. I got angry at times. Because I said, this is us. We've been taken. We've been brought to a country that didn't really want us for who we were. They wanted us for what we could give them.
Yes.
And you to bring that narrative from the beginning all the way up to where we are now is actually phenomenal.
Oh,
Actually phenomenal.
thank you.
I want to know a little bit about you. Because, I mean, I know a little bit about you from way back when. But you've done so many things. You're an Emmy Award-winning actor, singer, choreographer. Where did you get your musical start?
So I'm actually a rap artist, and I worked in a group called Here and Now with Derek Patterson. Now his name is Derek Quest. And that started in the 80s. But I'll go back to 1977 when I was in the 7th grade. So my grade went with the year that it was in the 70s. So if it was 75, I was in the 5th grade.
Oh.
If it was 76, I was in the 6th grade, and so on. So in 77, I listened to the jazz bass player Ron Carter. He was my favorite musician.
Really? Okay.
And I wanted to be a bass player. So when I was at the Mary E. Curley Middle School.
Oh, and I went to that school.
Yes, there was a woman named Miss Kaufman, a Jewish woman who taught string instruments. I walked by the auditorium and I saw all these people with kids with violins and violas and cellos. And I walked in and I said, I said to her, I want the big one, the one that goes doom, 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 doom. And she said, you mean a double bass?
There you go.
And I said, yes, I want to learn how to play the double bass. And I started my journey in the arts, playing the double bass. I wanted to be Ron Carter. So I had an afro. One of his albums had him with an afro and a pipe in his mouth. I went downtown and bought a pipe. Didn't smoke it. I mean,
You just had it there.
I had it in my mouth.
So
and,
you could.
And I would play and try to be Ron Carter. And I did that for a couple of years, got really good at it through the school, got a scholarship at 13 to go to BU and study with a college student there. I got so good at it that I started making up my own songs. And then my mother bought me an electric bass.
Oh.
Because Proposition 2.5 came in, took all the instruments away.
Out, that's right.
So I got a bass, electric bass, and I didn't really like how the electric bass
sounded.
It didn't sound the same.
Yeah, it doesn't have the emotion.
Yeah, the emotion and the warmth of it.
Yep.
But I still could play, but that faded away because, you know, my hormones kicked in and I wanted to run and play basketball and do all the other things. And then hip hop came along in the 80s.
Right.
And that's when everything changed. I got really into street culture along with doing the Boston Youth Theater with Elaine Hall-Corbin. So I got into the Boston Youth Theater. And I did that from 1982 up until, I don't know, 87, 88.
What was the Boston Youth
Theater?
So
Elma Lewis was doing everything up on the hill.
Yes, she was.
Elaine Hall-Corbin was doing everything downtown with the Boston Youth Theater.
Oh, okay.
So what it was a multi-generational, in terms of production, type of a youth theater, but it was diverse. They had kids from Newton, Roxbury, East Boston, Charlestown, Dorchester. She auditioned everybody.
Okay.
And what she wanted to do was introduce young people to the diverse nature of Boston and the diversity of Boston. So if you can imagine WGBH, like Zoom and all those old school television shows,
yes,
she wanted to create like a Zoom, if you will, but for theater arts. And I got all into the Boston Youth Theater. I did 7 years with the Boston Youth Theater, along with hip hop. And I was doing shows all over New England. I started linking up with, you name it, we did it. We went everywhere. Liz Walker, who became Reverend Liz Walker. I remember I did a performance of hip hop. I rapped and I did some breakdancing at the 7th Annual Emmy Awards. And she was there. And after the show, she said to me, hey, you want to come hang out with us at an after party? We're all going to just go and talk. And I hung out with her, Joyce Kohaywick from Channel 4, Chet Curtis, Natalie Jacobson, all these people who were on TV. I hung out, and I was only like 18. And there I was with all these maybe, they were probably 30 probably at the time.
Yes.
But that gave me a sense of the direction I was going in.
Exactly.
And now I'm working with Reverend Liz Walker. It's just amazing how
I know.
we're doing.
Is
yeah,
so
she's amazing.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'll come back to that later. But yeah, the idea of the 80s was a very big decade for me. I then went on, after my mother passed away in 87, I went on to audition for a show in New York under the tutelage of Diane Walker, famous tap dancer from Boston.
Okay.
She lives in Hyde Park. She's worked with Gregory Hines, Savion Glover. She's done Broadway, off-Broadway. She's done it all. She's like a master in tap dance around the world, and she's from Boston. So she became like my surrogate mother when my mother passed, and she got me into the Broadway scene.
Okay.
And I toured all of Europe for 6 months, came back, then I got signed to a record label with Derek with Here and Now.
Yes.
And we did that for 4 years together all over the world. And then I got into a show that Diane was working with that was on Broadway called Black and Blue, and we did that in Paris. And it was a big deal. It was a Tony Award winning show. And we did that for 6 months or so in Germany and in France. And I got a chance to work with all these amazing artists from New York and Europe. And that really changed my life, coming back from Europe the second time. Came back, and that's when I really focused in on community.
I was good. Okay.
Community. And the international stuff. Because I realized that most of the artists I was working with were like Harlem Renaissance artists.
Yes.
Because they lived in their communities that they served, and then they would do tours all over the world and come back to those communities.
Same communities.
Brooklyn, a lot of the artists that live in Brooklyn, like Spike Lee, he still lives there, and he's a big time.
Does?
Yeah, he never moved.
I thought he was out in LA.
No, he never moved. And then Denzel Washington, for a long time after he blew up as a film person, he stayed in Brooklyn.
Okay.
So I figured if they can do it there,
why can't you do it here?
I'll be right up in Roxbury. So I was able to,
proud of you.
You know, tour. I just told someone the other day, and this is really who I am. I would literally go to Europe and do a show, and instead, when I would come back into Logan Airport, instead of having a car pick me up, which was the most convenient thing to do, I would get on the blue line. I would purposely get on the blue line. And then get on the orange line.
I knew it.
And get off at Ruggles Station, and purposely, with all my luggage, and get on the 23 bus.
Oh, no.
So I could ground myself back in my community.
Your community.
And people would see me, and I would be sitting on the bus with all this luggage after touring and dancing in front of kings and, diplomat, you name it. We were like big. And I would get on the bus with this luggage and just say hi to people and try to connect. Get off on Warren Street, where I live, and I would be connected then to my community. I did that on purpose.
Because you wanted the connection.
That's right.
And you needed that connection.
You needed it, because what we know is this, and I'll tell you my Oprah Winfrey story. What we needed was to understand that you have to be grounded in order to keep doing this. You can't get caught up in buying. I could have gotten a house down Beacon Hill.
Right. Or out in Newton.
Or out in Newton or Wellesley.
Yes.
But I took my cues eventually, even with my pastor, Ray Hammond, I took my cues from him, because he and Pastor Gloria go all over the world, Africa, wherever.
Don't they? All over the
and
place.
Literally come back,
right back
to Roxbury.
Yes, they do.
Right? So I started.
Used to walk by their house all the time.
Right. I learned from them, but I was already doing that in my own way. And that really helped me to understand, man, you better be thankful, and you better realize that if it wasn't for this community, you wouldn't be where you are, and you wouldn't be doing what you're doing.
Okay. Unbelievable. That's all I gotta say, unbelievable. Because you say you do what you do, and communities is what grounds you, which is why we're sitting on this stage.
That's right.
In this community where I was born, raised, and grew up. And that is the reason I do what I do.
Absolutely.
And that's the reason I want to bring the artists, Black and brown artists, onto my set and talk to them and talk to you about community and about our art. And that's important to me. Because you're talking about how Paul did all the artwork. I had known Paul since before my son was born, and he's 37. But yeah, but you must remember my daughter. She was in Black naming Tamu.
Of course.
Tamu's pushing 50.
Well, it happens.
Yes, it does.
It happens.
But it's the fact that I understand the grounded.
Yes.
Because my son and daughter-in-law, they bought their first home.
There you go.
But they're not here. They're not here because they couldn't afford to buy here.
Sure.
Because I remember the stories that Aunt Elma used to tell us. She used to tell us about 15 Homestead Street.
Yeah.
And how her mother bought that house.
See?
For $8,000 then.
There you go. Now it's worth $750.
They sold it for $99.9 million.
Woo!
Yes. I said, what? My son wanted that house. But he couldn't get it.
That's amazing.
You know? But I'm saying all that to talk about being grounded.
Yes.
And you're talking about being grounded.
Yep.
And being grounded in community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my son's always fussing at me. Why are you staying in Roxbury? All they do is they shooting and killing and stabbing. And Mom, the way you are, I don't want you to get. I said, this is my community.
Mm-hmm.
I was born and raised here.
That's right.
I raised you here.
Yep.
I'm not going anywhere.
I know that's right. No need to.
Okay, there you go.
That's right.
The old saying, bury me in Wounded Knee. Well, my saying is bury me in Roxbury because I'm not going anywhere.
Hey, there you go. There it is.
But I want to hear about the Oprah Winfrey story.
So Oprah Winfrey. So my wife, Marcia Kim Jackson, she is really a special woman to me in so many ways. Not just because I love her, but she has taught me how to remember that everybody is just a person. Now, just a person, that's important. Of course, they're a person.
Yes.
But don't start tripping when you're around. And
All
I've been
those people
yeah.
that-
And I've been around stars, ever since 1988, right? But this was different. So George Faison, who's one of my mentors, he was the guy who got the Tony Award for The Wiz, famous choreographer from the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater.
Oh, okay.
Lives in New York. I started working with him for a while after the show Body and Soul. He mentored me through work. And I would go to New York, and sometimes he and his partner would go off to some other country, and they would ask me to house sit for them, take care of the dog. And stars would come by, like Roberta Flack would come by, hang out, or whoever. I met Maya Angelou through them. I met Cicely Tyson through them. I met, I mean, you just meet these people when they're at the house, right?
Right.
So you're hanging out with them. But then George Faison's partner passed away. I got the call. His name was Tad Schnug. And Tad was a kind soul. Everybody and their mama knew Tad. So I got the word that the funeral service was happening. The memorial service was happening in Harlem. I got there, and because of a whole bunch of strange circumstances, I had to stand near the front of the hall.
Oh, all right.
And it was, off to the side where the exit door was. Make a long story short, Oprah was sitting up in the front row with Gail, because Oprah and Gail were good friends with Tad and George.
Oh, okay.
So Oprah got up and spoke. When it came time for us to leave, Oprah and Gail have security guards that escort them out. So they were about to leave. I was near the exit door. They're coming towards me, and the pastor stopped everybody and said, "Can we please stop and pray before we leave? Let's pray for the family and pray for each other." Well, who do you think I was standing next to, hip to hip, when it came time to pray?
Oprah Winfrey.
Oprah Winfrey. So she's right here. And the church I go to, when you pray with the community, you hold hands.
Yes.
So I looked at her, she looked at me. We didn't say anything, there was no words. She grabbed my hand, I grabbed hers. And while we're praying for the family, you could sense that people were really trying to give that attention and focus to them. And then when it came time to pray for each other, I heard that still small voice say, "Don't pray for Oprah," because this was Oprah, right? Pray for the woman whose hand you hold.
Okay.
I heard that very clearly.
I think I understand that meaning.
And
not because she's Oprah, but because she's a person.
A person. And when I started praying silently for her, she was squeezing my hand tighter and tighter. And then as soon as he said amen, she was out the door. Because she was right next to the exit door, right? So I was kind of tripping a little bit. And I know we're getting ready to take a break, but I was tripping a little bit at the end of that moment. And I got back to Boston and said to my wife, "I prayed with Oprah." And she said, "Okay, honey.
Yes, all right.
Good. That's good that you prayed with Oprah. Now, let's get grounded again."
Yes.
And remember, she's a person just like you and me, and she needs prayer just like anybody else.
See, I would love to meet your wife. Oh my goodness.
And that grounded me.
Yes, it did. We are going to have a break, and we will be right back. I'm Elaine Hall-Corbin, your host. Welcome to Artists of Color. We are going to take a break, and we will be back momentarily.
What's more dangerous? A man who isn't afraid of death or one who's found everything to live for? I asked him if he was proud of me. He emphatically said yes, as he laid his pecan-colored head on my chest, and I went through my mind 1,000 times to figure out what that could possibly mean, and every single example ended in motivation for me. So you may not be afraid to die, but I'm more afraid to let them down. And I found something to live for, which is a dangerous motive forever fueled. See, your thoughts may be involuntary, but my actions are very calculated. I was a man with a plan, but now I'm a dad with a decree, and you can't take that from me. My sons ain't raised by no coward, and they won't be one either. If this be the measure of a man, the yardstick gonna need way more meters. I take it too far, so they never come up short, because I found everything to live for.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Artists of Color. I'm Elaine Hall-Corbin, your host. And as you've been listening to and seeing the amazing Wyatt Jackson, and we've been having the most astounding conversation. I mean, there is so much that I'm learning. I was doing some research on you, and you did a hip-hop workshop. Tell me about that. The reason I'm asking you to tell me is because there were pieces of that workshop that I read about, and how you were teaching the youth and teaching them about connection and community, and that we're all one, and we have to be that connection. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yes, so I have been blessed to be in spaces. I was just saying this in another interview for the Living Histories Project. For some reason, I wound up in the middle of a thing every so often that would change the world. When I was coming up in the 80s, I was dead smack in the middle of the beginning of the hip hop culture. in Roxbury. Then I went to New York and hung out there in the Bronx and in Manhattan with those hip hoppers. And I was there when the thing took off. And I knew the people who were the movers and shakers, the innovators of hip hop. These were people that I knew. And it was like, how could that happen, the timing of that? I was at the age where I could travel to New York at least and hang out there.
Yes.
And here in Roxbury and Dorchester, there was a flowering of the hip hop culture because the Latinx people that were moving from New York to Boston, they laid some of that on us, from the graffiti to the rapping to the DJing, the breakdancing. And I happened to meet those guys just because I was in. So it became very clear to me. Joe Richardson, Alex Garcia, Naheem Allah, that's what he calls himself now, Alex Garcia, Naheem Garcia.
Naheem.
We were all there at the beginning. And I noticed when I got a little older to start researching it myself, hip hop, I read a few books, one by Trisha Rose called Black Noise. Dr. Trisha Rose, for her dissertation at NYU, she wrote a book about hip hop culture. They thought she was crazy.
Oh, wow.
And it turned out to be a book that became a national bestseller. We call it the Bible of hip hop culture. I read that and I saw connections to what we went through in Roxbury, the kids in Philadelphia who grabbed on to hip hop, the kids in Chicago, the kids all over the country in all these urban communities. We all gravitated to this thing called hip hop because we were able to use our voice.
There. Use your voice. Use our voice.
In any way, whether it was through the electric boogie stuff, or if it was through actually rapping, or graffiti, or breakdance, we were able to use our bodies and our voices to tell our story. And even though at that time Reaganomics was going on and there was a lot of stuff going on with the war on drugs, we were able to counter that narrative by being these creative people. And we drew crowds everywhere we went.
Everywhere.
Lisa Lee that you had on, I think Lisa Wright is her last name. I think it's Wright is her last name. I'm not terribly sure. Lisa Lee, though, I know that.
There we go. That's what I know.
She is a rap artist.
Yes, she is.
And I remember we was downtown in between Macy's and Filene's. And we had this big block party that the mayor let us do down there.
Oh.
Mayor Flynn. And she was the MC for the afternoon. And there must have been 300 youth of color all surrounding Lisa Lee. And then I saw an old video of it. I don't remember doing this, but I got on the mic and told everybody to back up.
Give her some space.
Give her some space, and then we came out and danced. I don't remember dancing. I just remember seeing Lisa Lee and telling, I do remember something about crowd control, but I didn't know it was me. I was the one who told, back up, give her some space, let her do her thing.
Wow.
But we attracted crowds, we attracted interest. There was a Globe article about us. There were people who came and wanted to do documentaries on us.
See.
And so we didn't know at the time that we were in Boston promoting a culture that would now be global.
Global.
And now it is the #1 culture for youth. And it's like you can create a whole career and calling for your life around hip hop.
Yes. I need a question. Hopefully you can answer this. I know what hip hop is. I know about the culture of hip hop. But is there, and maybe I'm wrong, is there a negative about hip hop?
So I believe every cultural expression has a positive and a negative to it. And of course, I believe, if people are doing things in the videos that are not healthy,
or productive,
or they're
positive.
calling people out of their name, right? and all the other things that go on, then of course, that's the negative side. The positive side of it all is that you're giving young men and women of color an opportunity to go into studios and tell their story using, what I would say, using both hemispheres of the brain. This whole idea of it's called whole brain thinking.
Oh, never heard that.
Dr. Roger Sperry, who won the Nobel Prize around split brain research, says that when you do poetry and you're doing something constructive with the poetry in terms of production, you're using all kinds of facets of your brain that are very powerful to use. So here you have these young people going in the studios telling their stories in this creative way. Then you have these break dancers who are using their bodies to defy gravity.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
Like gymnasts. And then you have these graffiti artists that have the same mindset as a Paul Goodnight, but they're
Yes.
using cans
Oh.
and they're using spray paint instead of using pastels and all the other stuff.
Yes.
So my point is that hip hop, to me, entered into a space where you are expressing high art, low art, whatever kind of art you want to call it, and you're doing it in a way that can be healthy.
Okay.
And so if someone puts graffiti on my wall of my house, that's not a healthy way to use your spray
The
paint.
spray paint. Yes.
If someone's rapping about someone and about how they're going to kill them or jack them up,
Or whatever.
that's not healthy. Now that can be looked at, some people will argue that's a metaphor. He's saying that as a metaphor, but no, if you just take the words for what they are, not healthy. Or they're using their body to be hypersexual in a way that promotes something that
Yeah.
is not very becoming for young people to see.
Yes.
But if you take all the positive sides of the things I just mentioned, take your graffiti and put it on a canvas, or you get a commission to put your work on a wall. When it's legal, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're doing poetry, rap music that helps to affirm the community you're from, and
That's
talks about how hip you are in creative ways, there's nothing wrong with that.
No. No.
And then lastly, of course, if you're using your body to defy gravity
Oh. Okay.
and show people how you can fly on the ground like the
Yes.
floor lords do, then
When I
that
first
can,
started
be
seeing
amazing.
that, I used to say, how do they do that? I could never understand
It's
it.
called angular momentum. Your body, when you are doing those spins,
Yes.
your body, the actual body becomes like a windmill.
Oh.
And that's what they call them, windmills. And the energy that's generated makes your body go faster, or it makes your body begin to defy gravity.
Oh my goodness.
It's you look at a breakdancer, you can see it. They start actually
Yeah,
flying off the ground.
That's why I asked that question. Like, how do they do that?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I know, because you've done it.
I've done it. My body just does other things now. Like I can do all of the,
You can do
the
that.
waves and all the ticking and popping, but not that stuff on the floor anymore. No, I will break something. You talk about breakdancing, I will break something. Yeah.
When I want to go back to We Move in Color.
Sure.
You tell me how the dancers
Yes.
and putting this production together.
Yes. Yes.
Tell me, what does it take?
So when I reached out to Maxine Lyle, whose clip you just saw, by the way, that was the step dancing. She's on her way to doing Broadway, and she's got a show that she's going to be coming out with, and you'll hear all about it. Okay, so it's under development right now. It's going all over the country in different places. She's workshopping. But when she was asked to come on board as the step dancer, we were very specific. We want you to choreograph something for the middle passage.
Okay.
Because what we know is that folks were under these ships, in the belly of these ships,
Yes.
trying to beat out rhythms to say who's from my
where?
tribe.
That's right.
Right? Because
Yes.
they were, so that went on a lot. There's all kinds of stories about how people were banging out rhythms. 6-month journey
Okay. Yes.
on a boat.
On a boat.
Sometimes 8 months. The shortest was 4 months. Can you imagine? So they were
can't even imagine 4 months.
communicating through rhythm, a lot of them. So I wanted to use step dance as a metaphor for beating out those rhythms in the belly of the ship.
Oh.
So she took that in and delivered.
She sure
Masterpiece.
delivered.
Then Maurice Chestnut from Bring the Noise, Bring the Funk. We wanted to create a Harlem Renaissance scene, but we didn't want to ground it in what we call classic tap.
Okay.
We used a little bit of classic tap. When I was in Black and Blue, that's all classic tap. Tap dance that, you know, the masters like the Nicholas Brothers.
I was going to say the Nicholas
they
Brothers.
choreographed that. Henry Latang choreographed that. These are like famous names.
Yes.
And it was classic tap. I didn't want, per se, all classic tap in the Harlem Renaissance number. I wanted there to be some inklings of the future of tap dance, which was noise funk with Savion Glover. So I asked Maurice Chestnut to give that flavor, and he delivered. Then I reached out to Cheryl Pollard Thomas. Cheryl and I did the tour in Europe back in '88. We worked with George Faison, we worked with all these people. And what we wanted to do with Cheryl was create she's an African dancer and a ballet dancer, modern dancer. We wanted to create an Africa that was abundant. Like, you are gonna choreograph what happened before the 1600s.
Yes.
So we wanted to do representational choreography.
What was before.
Right, so it could have that sense of Africa, but you see glimpses of modern. You see glimpses of the stuff that's coming.
Okay.
So that was the beginning. So she did that and delivered,
Yep.
right?
She definitely delivered.
So all of it
I was like,
became
oh my
clear.
God.
Those 3 choreographers, the reason why I went with 3 choreographers instead of 1 was because when I did Body and Soul in Europe, we had 3 choreographers instead of 1.
Oh.
We had George Faison, Graciela Danielle, famous choreographer in New York, and then we had Mercedes Ellington, the granddaughter of Duke Ellington.
The granddaughter?
She did tap.
Whoa.
He did African. She did like popular dance forms for jazz and so on.
Okay.
So I wanted that
The same.
triangle effect. She would give this, he would give that, she would give this, and let it synergistically work. So this all came from birthing out a new way of doing things called story design.
I was going to ask you about story design.
Yes. So what story design is different than directing. Directors started their thing in the 19th century.
Right.
Before that, you had to come from an elite family who knew how to read, you know, Shakespeare type stuff.
Yes.
And everybody just kind of, if you knew the
Use an
text,
instrument.
yeah,
Yes.
you just worked together. There was not a director per se. When the 19th century came along and directors, people who wanted to have that, not power, but they wanted to have that authority.
Okay.
And they started directing these Shakespearean pieces and others, many others. But this idea of a director became almost, it was almost too much for certain generations of actors. Actors back in the, let's just say 1920s, started rebelling against directors.
Oh.
But were still able to work with
Work with
directors, right? And you had a real push to try to make the actor much more responsible for their development
own
of their character.
character.
So here comes design thinking about maybe 20 years ago. Companies started hiring people to think about design. And design is much more about me asking you, what would you like to do with this television show? And then you say, oh, I want this, I want that, I want this. And then I say, okay, well, I'm the designer. Then I go to your assistants who work in the control booth. And then I say to them, what would make this television show more interesting for you? Oh, I think we could do this and this. And then what my job as a designer is to take all of that feedback and empathize with your position, your perspective, empathize with their perspective, and create something new out of that.
Okay.
So what story design is as a person who's creating a show, I work with the talent and say, if you were going to be dancing in pre-colonial Africa, West Africa, and you had to express love for your country and for your community at that moment, or for your continent and for your community at that moment, what would the dance look like? And then that person would talk, and then I consider that. Then I go to the choreographer and I say, if you could create blah, blah, blah about pre-colonial Africa, and these people are expressing love, what would that look like? So now I take the dancer's feedback and the choreographer's feedback, and then I do what you would do with a company. I story design it. I turn their perspectives into the story.
Oh, wow.
So that way it's not me directing, it's me designing.
Because you've taken everybody's contribution, everybody's perspective, and you've turned it into a story.
Now, yes, now there's pushback because people are used to having someone tell them what to do.
Well, true.
And they're also used to having everything organized the way it needs to be. You need to run this rehearsal like this. Or how come he's not, how come the person, how come he didn't see that that person wasn't pointing their feet when they did that dance? Correct that person, make that, no. What you do is you allow people to experience the idea, and then you circle back later on and say, oh, remember to point your feet. Oh, remember to look up.
Okay.
Oh, remember this, remember that. Those details are much easier after you've gotten their buy-in. Okay. Once they believe it, once they believe the story that they helped design, then you have a much better chance of bringing them in to the excellence that they have in them. So I did get pushback a minute because people were like, you know, you're not really, what are you doing? Is this directing or what?
Yeah,
no.
you're not directing. What are you doing?
Yeah, come on, right? No. And then they started to see it. And then you get still some people who just may not, I need you to tell me what to do. Of course I'm going to tell you when to enter and when to exit. And then I may give you some suggestions on whatever. And then lastly, yes, I'm going to say, keep your head up, keep your eyes up, point your foot. But first, let's get you in there, and I want to hear from you. I want you to feel this. Okay. And then let me story design.
Wow. That, I can't even figure out a word for that, because that is so profound to really, and like you said, you're not directing. You're getting feedback, you're getting understanding, you're getting all of that, and then you're putting it into the story. Then you go back and say, don't forget to do this, don't forget to. That's an amazing way of directing.
Thank you.
Because it makes, now I see what I was trying to see when I first saw the performance last year.
Yes.
I said, oh, okay, now I understand it. Yes. Because all I could see was the precision, the phenomenal dancing and creativity, but then I didn't. Now you put the design in there.
And let me just add this one piece, and I know we're getting ready to go. That's the same thing I did with Paul Goodnight and Lou Jones. I asked them, what do you want to say with your art? What do you want to say with your photos of Africa, Lou? And they took me over to their studio, to their apartment, and showed me their work. And the work, it just all kind of manifested with, this is it right here, this is it. Because they internalized it. They're masters, of course.
Of course.
So they were able to take the story and give me exactly what I was looking for based off of the design idea.
That's, oh, wow.
And Gen Rubin. Gen Rubin is the Grammy Award-winning producer who has worked with Aretha Franklin, Mary J. Blige, all these big names. He worked with me and Derek with our first album. I asked him.
See?
And then he composed all this music based off of what he thought and believed the story is.
Yes.
But if I had told him, give me this specific thing and that, and if I, it wouldn't have come out as rich.
And it was, and it is.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, tell my audience when and where.
Yes.
We Move in Color is
We
going
Move
to
in
have.
Color, October 6th and 7th at the Strand Theater in Boston. We will be there at 7 o'clock on Friday the 6th and 7 o'clock on Saturday the 7th. You can buy tickets at wemoveincolor.com. The box office for the Strand will be open at 10 o'clock in the morning until 4, Tuesday through Friday of this week. You can go by and pick up your tickets. We also have, if you go on the website, there is a limited amount of tickets we're giving away for free because we got a very generous donation, from someone to buy tickets for people who don't have the money. And there's a limited amount. So if you go there, get that, and if you don't get those, we do have seats that are available for less money up in the balcony and so on. Get those, and we'll work something out for you, okay? So that's it. I'm telling you, we just got back from the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. We did it in the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and now here we are, back at the Strand.
And as you can see, my guest has been Wyatt Jackson from We Move in Color. You gotta see this. This is the most amazing, profound narrative performance I have ever witnessed. And I saw it last year. And I'm going again this year. I was so, as I was telling him, and I'm sure you heard me, I laughed, I cried, I got angry. It's us, it's our narrative. And this has been put together in such a profound, majestic, cultural way that I could never have ever thought or see. Wyatt, thank you for being with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you, man.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us at Artists of Color. Seeing us again the end of October. Have a great afternoon. Oh, and by the way, this will be shown again on Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Have a great afternoon, everyone.